Last Friday marked 1 year since the Lewiston mass shootings. As the state continues to grieve, Senator Susan Collins has introduced the Armed Forces Crisis Intervention Notification Act. It comes in response to investigative reports into the shootings carried out by an Army reservist. Immediately following the shootings, both Collins and Senator Angus King called for the Army Inspector General to conduct an independent review to more fully understand what happened and what can be done to prevent future tragedies. If passed, this legislation would require U.S. military services to use state-level crisis intervention laws, such as Maine's Yellow Flag Weapons Removal Law, if a service member poses a serious threat to themselves or others.
It would require reporting to state and local and county law enforcement in such a case. And it would also require that the service branch fully participate in any court hearing that comes about as a result of sharing that information.
Collins says the bill, which is co-sponsored by King, is being offered as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. She hopes it will be taken up in December.